Hello, I'm John Feldt. This is the weekly water outlook for January 27th, 2013. Across the Southeast U.S., for the most part, precipitation was fairly light. There's a broad area of missing data over the Ohio Valley. That area actually received some more significant rainfall and snow this week. There was some significant heavier snow over parts of the Appalachians, but for the most part over northern Alabama and Georgia and the far northern part of the Savannah River Basin, a very light amount of precipitation. There was some more significant precipitation over eastern parts of North Carolina, up to an inch of rain in that region. Now, if I look at percent of normal rainfall, despite some rain and some snow, almost the entire Southeast U.S. reported below normal precipitation this week. Matter of fact, that dark red is well below normal precipitation as we round out the last 7 days across the Southeast U.S. Now, I will be keeping you updated on snow. There was a bit of snow in the central part of the Appalachians, and you can see that it dipped down into parts of the western parts of North Carolina and just a small part of western South Carolina. The purple is very light amounts of snow, but there was some more significant snow over the higher elevations of Virginia and the central part of the Appalachians. That's that area of yellow and green. This does not pertain to the Southeast U.S., but I will be looking at snow over the northern part of the Midwest for snowmelt potential later this year. So here is the overall snow depth, and you can see as of this recording, there is some light snow over Virginia and the eastern parts of North Carolina. Generally, the white is very light snow, very little snow at all, just sort of a scattered dusting, and the lighter blue is a little bit more significant snow, but still fairly light. We have to get into the darker blue before it becomes significant. Now, the water equivalent is actually very important as far as potential for runoff. And over parts of that central Appalachians there, you can see that darker shade of blue, and that's fairly significant. When that melts, that is going to definitely bring some rises on area rivers and soak soils in that region of the central part of the Appalachians there, eastern Kentucky, northeast Tennessee, and the western Carolinas and Virginia. Over eastern Carolinas, much more lighter amounts of precipitation in the form of water equivalent there, generally lighter amounts. Now, there is some scattered flooding here and there across the Southeast U.S. For many months now, we've had this area of vulnerability or enhanced precipitation over Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, small part of northern Georgia, as well as parts of eastern Tennessee and Kentucky. And there are some pockets of flooding here. Generally, the yellow and the orange are either high within bank or just some minor flooding. This is not significant at this time of year. Typically, we do get some pockets of flooding here and there. But I am going to talk about perhaps increasing vulnerability in just a bit. Now, I haven't showed the ENSO or El Nino update for a while, and there was an update this week. I wanted to point out here that it has gone from slightly positive to slightly negative. That's definitely still a neutral category, and the models are showing it to remain neutral for quite some time. The only thing I'll say about this here is that the models have been trending more negative. You might remember a couple months ago it was forecast to remain maybe a +2, +3, and now it's forecast to remain a minus 0.1 or so. I think any way you look at it, it still should remain in neutral. Okay, now the big picture as far as the jet stream this week, I wanted to point out that we're going through a transition, and with that transition is going to bring a rain and snow event to the Southeast U.S. towards the middle part of this week. The blue is early this week, the jet stream. The yellow is the middle part of the week, and then the green is the mid to latter part of the week. And basically what we're doing is we're transitioning into this type of pattern right here. The green is what will become somewhat steady as we get into the mid to latter part of the week, and then through the rest of this month into early next month. The blue and yellow are the transition. So I wanted to say what we're headed for is the jet stream of green, which we'll set up later this week. Along that transition, a frontal boundary will be passing through, and this is the forecast for rainfall. And I guess I'd call this more of a modest rain or snow in the higher elevation event over the Southeast U.S. most areas will receive an order of a ½ inch to maybe 1.5 inches of rainfall. And in some areas, that could near that threshold that rivers will begin to be on the rise again, and perhaps even some scattered flooding here and there. Matter of fact, I'm going to point out some of the vulnerabilities, I think, in the next slide or so. I did want to point out the probability of very heavy snow, 4 inches or more, towards the middle part of the week. That looks like that's going to remain well up to our north over the Great Lakes region. Now, as far as forecast soil moisture change goes this week, if you look closely, you see that many of these areas are calling for a light shading of blue, and that says that soil moisture will be increasing as we go through the week. I think they'd be more significant if we had a more prolonged rain. Actually, the rain looks like it's going to be sort of maybe a day rain event, and then the other days will become dry. But I did want to point out this vulnerability here, and what I've seen over the last not just a week or two, but actually this last several months. This area in green, I think, has an enhanced vulnerability here for flooding, and I wanted to point that out because that area could receive 1 inch or 2 of rain this week, and with the ground saturated and rivers running somewhat high now, there is that possibility of flooding. Now, right at this point, I don't think it's going to be a significant flooding. I don't think it's going to necessarily be a widespread flooding, but inflow or runoff will be enhanced in this area, so reservoir operators can expect a bit more as far as inflows into the reservoirs, and streams are going to probably be rising quicker than they had maybe a month or so. And I will be updating that as we go through this week, but right now I want to point out that for a long time, the drought was the vulnerability. In this area, I think flooding, we've tipped that now, we're looking at flooding. But as far as soil moisture goes, I wanted to point out again, this is a line here that we've seen for quite some time where soils are very wet in the green and very dry in the red, and that divides many of the basins, the ACF Basin, the Savannah River Basin, where the far northern part is much wetter than the rest. And this week, it's a possibility that that rain could push a little bit further east, but right now, we're really going to have to see, because I know many of these have sort of fallen apart for many weeks now, if not many months. So the general trend, as we round out January into February, remember that green jet stream? I wanted to show you that pattern because it looks like this is going to be a somewhat stable pattern with above normal precipitation here and colder air spilling into the east, and below normal temperatures. For the Southeast U.S., I think after this week's rainfall, midweek rainfall, I think the overall pattern is for either near or below normal precipitation, and temperatures either near normal or below normal. Note here, if you look very closely, that pattern of enhanced dry conditions over the east and a bit wetter over the west does look like it's going to continue like we've seen now for quite some time. So the takeaway this week, a midweek rain and snow event in higher elevations, 1 to 2 inches of rain, fairly widespread. We're going to have to keep a very close eye if it gets above that, because if it does get above that, I think there is that potential of some flooding. Area to sort of keep an eye on right now, Mississippi, Alabama, and then the higher elevations of eastern parts of Kentucky and far northeast parts of Georgia. Now, I'm working on my newsletter. I will be getting that out later this week. I'm going to be talking a lot about the features that are factors that are causing our weather and water resource impacts that will be issued later this week. Again, I thank you for listening to this week's Outlook. I will be updating it next week.